Good evening, Internet, and as always, I do hope this finds you well. And tonight we are doing Eddie Van Halen. Now, in deference to last month when we did Slash, I was going to dress the Strat with electrician's tape to try and make it look a little bit more like Eddie's iconic Frankenstein Strat, but the result was it wasn't good. So we're back to au naturel. I hope that's all right with you. So potted history and tabs are in the blog as always. If you're familiar with this, I'll throw links in the description below. So let's get into this. Now, of course, you can't talk about Eddie Van Halen without talking about tapping. Now, I know there's going to be a whole load of comments, well, maybe one or two comments, people saying that Eddie Van Halen didn't invent tapping, and yes, they're quite right. And there's various theories on people who did. He claims to have seen it done by, I think, Brian May and Billy Gibbons and Steve Hackett from Genesis. They're all people who can lay claim to having invented the technique, but Eddie very definitely popularised it. And there's one technique that is synonymous with Eddie Van Halen. It is tapping. So let's take a little look at how we can do it. What I'm doing here is the basic triplet pattern. It's used in Eruption, but it's also used, it's the first thing that people think of when they think of tapping. So what I've got here is a basic E minor arpeggio laid out along the B string. There's my root E, 5th fret on the B string. There's my minor third, the G, here on the 8th fret of the B string, and then I'm going to tap the 5th, the B, here on the 12th fret. And what I'm going to do first is just a really simple triplet idea. So we're going to count 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3. So what I'm doing is tapping with the index finger, although you could use the middle finger as well. In fact, there's an argument that you perhaps should use the middle finger on the 1, pulling off to the 5th fret note on the and then hammering the 8th fret note on the a. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, I cannot stress how important it is. If you're going to do tapping well, you have to have a rhythm behind it. The number of people, and I can probably include my teenage self in this if I'm being brutally honest, who think that they're tapping and they're just going and it sounds god awful. So do yourself a favour, start it slow, start it cleanly, give yourself a solid rhythm to play to. So we'll start with a 1, 2, 3, 4. In terms of technique, I would suggest resting your thumb over the top of the neck to give yourself a good solid bearing. That helps me to rest my thumb there. Now, there's various ways that you can do the tapping. Van Halen would tend to grip the pick with his middle finger, use the index finger for tapping. If you're new to tapping and you grip the pick with your thumb and your index finger, I would say probably try and use the middle finger. This is do as I say, not do as I do. I actually grip the pick with my thumb and index finger and then switch to tapping with my index finger, but I think that's largely because I'm an idiot. You should probably not do it this way. It's not an efficient way of doing things. Unfortunately, it's one that's just worked its way in, and I would need to unlearn this. Once you've mastered triplets, then obviously the next step would be to up the speed, and I would say that try and keep the tempo the same and move to a sextuplet rhythm. So that's 6 per beat. So there you're counting 1 and a 1 and a 2 and a 2 and a 3 and a 3 and a... There's various little developments that you can put on this pattern as well. So you could try, for example, tapping and then pulling off to the 8th fret and then to the 5th fret. 1, 2. You can try combining the two. Or I've got to say, it is immense fun. But always do try and keep a solid rhythmic grounding. Make sure that you have a groove there that you're playing to a beat. Now, what Eddie does in Eruption is simply move that pattern around, but what we're going to take a look at is to just see how we can use this to adjust to a chord pattern. it's no coincidence that Eddie Van Halen also was a very proficient pianist and keys player, so he was well aware of harmonies and how chords are structured. So if we take a moment to think about a very common chord sequence, I'm going to say E minor, C, G, D. You'll recognise this as one of the magic 4 chord sequences, the 6-4-1-5. So what I'm going to do here then, if I look at the E minor chord, that's E, G and B. The next chord is the C, that's C, E and G. So I can keep the E and the G in place. All I need to do is move my tap note from a B, 12th fret, to a C on the 13th fret. And my next chord is going to be a G, so that's spelled G, B, D. So although, yeah, I could try and keep the D, B here, and the D and the G here, that's going to be quite a stretch. So I'm going to cheat and move my G, B, D here. And then for the D chord, I'm going to keep obviously the D in place and move my other notes down to F sharp and A. Again, don't worry, look in the link for the tab. Giving me this. Or if I went with the variation on the pattern, pulling off. Combining those ideas. Oh, so cock it out, Riley. Yeah, that was deliberate just to prove that it's live. And then final variation. And also I've got a treat for you because I have actually prepared a loop, so here we go. So here goes the first original So there we have Eddie Van Halen from Mortal Fingers. Okay, now another facet of Van Halen's playing was where he would simply take a physical shape and move it across the strings in sort of parallel. So we're not adhering to a scale shape here. Now you recognise that that's from the end of solo of Jump. And all he's doing here is moving the 15th, 16th and 18th frets across. So we're not really adhering to any sort of key here. What's important is that we start on the root, C, and we finish on the G, even though you've actually gone to G sharp or A flat ahead of it to kind of a minor 6, which in the key of C major, usually not a great chord, but as long as you can finish on a strong chord tone, such as a root or a fifth, you can usually be forgiven any slight wobbliness in between. Right, now this is where things get seriously widdly, and I'm going to have to apologise for one of these licks. This first one, this is a legato pattern that you encounter in Eruption, but it's actually all over his stuff. I encountered it in I'm the One, I encountered it in Spanish Fly, and it's obviously a pattern that just Eddie Van Halen naturally gravitates towards. We all have patterns like that. I mean, here I'm using the A Dorian mode, so A, B, C, D, and I would also could go on and use E, F sharp, G. So all that type of stuff is all based around that same legato pattern. Now, one variation that he does on this is when he goes into Ice Cream Man, and I actually thought this was tapped because some of the interval reaches are insane. I'm going to take this very slowly because I think it's probably going to take me about 12 years to get it up to speed. Guitar, you're going to need to have your guitar upright. It wasn't until I saw Eddie playing it like this, I found some YouTube live footage and saw that in fact no, he's not tapping this, he's in fact playing this normally fretted. And this is built around an E arpeggio, 12th fret on the high E, that's your E, 16th fret, that's your G sharp, major third, 19th fret, that's your B, 5th, and we're also going to bring in the 19th fret F sharp note on the B string. That can work as the chord second or add 9. So you can think of this as being an E add 9 arpeggio. Quite why he chose to do it that way, we will never know. I guess he just liked the sound of it and felt that the stretch was worthwhile and maybe fancied a challenge. It's doable, but you are going to need to watch your thumb position. Mine, you can see that there's right around the heel of the neck, thumb very low down to sort of arch over. It's not something I've ever seen him doing anything else, but it's a useful little idea to play with, and it shows how he's taken that sort of 3 notes along one string and then 1 note on the string below legato idea and played around with that. Okay, last up then are harmonics. Now you've made it this far and you're into Van Halen, you're probably already aware of natural harmonics and how you produce them. Aware of is their connection to the underlying note. Just for those who aren't familiar with natural harmonics, all you do is, we'll start at the 12th fret, and let's start on the high E string, and you're going to rest the tip of your finger directly over the fret, not push down onto it, but directly over the fret, resting on the note. Pick and pull away, and we can do that on each string. That's the 12th fret, that's the most common what's called a harmonic node point. So basically it's an easy place to get harmonics. You can also find them on the 7th fret and the 5th fret. Eddie would quite regularly use these as part of a melodic or harmonic lick as well, so to outline something like an arpeggio. Now the way that these work is the 12th fret notes are the same as their fretted equivalents. So you're looking at exactly an octave above the open string, so anything, you see E, E, B, G, D, F, A, E. The 5th fret are 2 octaves above the open string. So for example, we have G here, G an octave higher here, and G another octave higher here. And then in the middle you've got the 7th fret, which is an octave and a 5th above the open string, or an octave above the fretted note. So 7th fret on the G string you have a D note, and then 7th fret harmonic is another D note, but it's an octave higher. And if you've ever wondered how the 5th fret tuning method works, that's how. So you have the 5th fret harmonic on the low E string produces an E note, that will be the equivalent of the one on the 19th fret of the A string, or on the 7th fret as a harmonic. It doesn't work across the G and the B, but it'll work across all the others. Okay, and that pretty much wraps it up then for looking at Van Halen. We will come back to him another time. I'm sure it's Van Halen. He's a legend. He deserves more than one go in the block. There's an awful lot, really. We only scratched the surface of it. But hopefully you've taken away a few ideas for, along with the 1-minute licks, of course, taking away a few ideas that you can use to influence your own playing. So once again, I will bid you adieu. Please do like, share and subscribe. There's all sorts of free stuff coming, and I'm gradually getting the hang of DaVinci Resolve, so over the next few months these videos might start to look a little bit more professional. In the meantime, I do hope that they're at least useful, and right, I'll see you next month. All the best.